Hello, everybody. Good to have you all here today, 20th of April 2022. And it's amazing. It's amazing day for us because today we celebrate birthday of our dear friend Vanessa Anceloni. So thank you, Vanessa, for all help, the opportunity you gave to us to be here with Kardec Radio, all your efforts to spread the spiritism in English. So, uh, just saying thank you. It's not enough, but receive this moment our wishes of best anniversary birthday for you, my dear. Okay, so and today, as we can see, we have our friend from Spain here. So we have a Spaniard with us today. So let's do our and well, before going to this, we will talk today why does God allow suffer? It's a question we raise every single day, and I I truly believe one day in your life you ask that question: why me? uh, why God allowed that. So I don't know. I don't know what age you are, but for sure, at least once time you did it. Okay, so I will say to the boys, let's start with the only lady we have with us today. So Elsa, good evening, my dear.
Good evening, Stevan. Good evening, Charles. Good evening, Rodrigo. Good evening, everyone that will be entering this room now. It's a great pleasure to be here once again because we are a humble room or a window and we open our window to the world. We can exchange talks and a good energy to everyone, especially when you have different topics every week. That is a blessing that you can really read something, talk about it, and reflect what we are doing towards us, enlightening our soul with spiritual light events, lives. Thank you all. Welcome all.
Thank you. Buenas noches, señor Ortega. ¿Cómo estás?
Buenas noches, yo bien, y espero que todos vosotros igualmente. Una vez más, muchas gracias por estar aquí con vosotros. Espero que podamos aquí hoy eh, pasar una palabra de consuelo para aquellos que todavía buscan. Es la respuesta que comentó Stevan, porque son preguntas que hacemos nosotros. Yo por lo menos la hago siempre, aunque tengamos el espiritismo que nos esclarece siempre, ¿no? Jesús a través del Evangelio. Pero claro, nos pasan tantas cosas en nuestra vida a diario que es difícil muchas veces no contestar y no tener aquella conversación con Dios, no y decir, "No, ¿por qué? ¿No? Pero claro, estamos aquí hoy para intentar hablar un poquito sobre esto y esclarecer un poquito a nuestros hermanos y a nosotros mismos, porque somos los mensajeros, ¿no?, de la espiritualidad. Muchas veces decimos cosas que nosotros mismos nos sorprendemos con lo que decimos. Entonces, muchas gracias y bienvenidos a todos. So welcome, everyone. Sorry for the long speech in Spanish, but it's a pleasure to be here with all of you, with all of the people here. Charles, Stevan, Elsa, thank you for the invitation once again. So it's a great topic. It's a topic where we question ourselves every day. At least myself, I do that, as I was saying in Spanish. And we always have this kind of, let's say, deep conversation with God, asking why me and why I'm passing through that. So it will be a great topic for today, and I invite you everyone for asking us about it, because we are also like you, instruments of God, and we also get surprised with what we say sometimes, because the spirits use us to say something to all of us in here. So thank you all, and welcome.
Mr. Kempf, ça va bien?
Très bien, très bien. Bonjour, bonsoir à tous. Très heureux d'être à nouveau parmi vous ce soir. Cette semaine spéciale hein, du mois d'avril, le 20, 2 jours après le 18, les 165 ans du livre des esprits. Et pour parler d'un thème aussi important, combien de personnes souffrent sur la Terre et ont besoin de comprendre pourquoi elles souffrent, pour avoir la force, l'endurance de pouvoir supporter ces souffrances, voire même trouver des solutions pour les réduire et voire pour les éliminer. Voilà. So hello, good morning, good evening to everyone. Very happy to be here again with you today, this special week, 20th of April. 2 days ago, it was the 18th, it was 165 years of the first publication of the Spirit's book, which brought us all these teachings about, amongst others, of the subject of today, why suffering. And it's extremely important. There are so many people suffering on Earth that need to understand why they are suffering, what is the purpose of the suffering, how can they overcome this suffering, or even maybe reduce it or eliminate it, or avoid having other suffering coming up. And this is what we will try to explain today a little bit.
Great. So, buonanotte, Nancy Valenti. Boa noite, Luviem. So, glad to have you all here. As usual, we will start with a short video, and then we will start to discuss the topic, okay? Let just me share my... Oh, our dear friend from Uruguay, Ruben. Buenas noches, Ruben. Okay, let me share here, share this and this. Okay.
It's tough for us to understand that the difficulties of life that are presented to us may cause us to not perhaps want to do something good because we only see the now and we forget that there's a greater picture involved in everything. There are minute details and we tend to focus on those details, but it's important to remember that those details are small parts of a great machine that eventually will produce the outcome of those things that we want. Whenever we face these small situations, we have to do what is right, what is good, in accordance with our conscience, because we are the best judges of our own selves. The conscience is the best judge of our own actions. So if we listen to our own selves, when we're doing certain actions, certain deeds, we will always do what is right. We will be in accordance with what God expects from us, the right behavior, the behavior that will open up new horizons for us, broaden our vision of life, and allow us to be at peace with ourselves. Because when we don't do what is right, we're not at peace with ourselves. When we do what is wrong, we frustrate ourselves because we know that we are doing something wrong, because we are not following that guide, which is the conscience. The law of God is written within our conscience. And if the law of God is within our conscience, that means that all we have to do is pay attention, pay heed to whatever our conscience tells us. And everything is based on love. God is all about love. The truth is all about love. So if we listen to our conscience, we're following the example of love. We're following that cosmic verb that reigns supreme in the universe. And we're following in accordance in the footsteps of the greatest moral example this earth ever had, which was Jesus Christ.
Okay. Good. So, and my introduction here, it's a mix between the book Heaven and Hell, the book Céu e Inferno from Paulo Figueiredo, also Autonomia from Paulo Figueiredo. So this is where my introduction comes from here. And when we talk about God, we need to remember the natural law. And the natural law governs the effort of human spirit in search of learning from life, and the law of choice of evidence. So the difficulties we face in our material life every day, they not they are not good nor bad. Well, so Stevan, you're saying all the challenges, all the troubles, all the problems I face every day, I this is not good or bad for me. I'm saying yes, and you will see why. Because when we want to learn from these experiences, they will be useful at certain moment of your life. So all challenges, tribulations are passing incidents chosen from awakening of virtues, overcoming perfections when the individual realizes the true meaning of life. So when we move away from the false idea, from the great error of creating someone, so I need to suffer, I need to go through this to evolve, so it's our choices, our incarnation means opportunity. So the spirit is responsible for its act and its condition of happiness and unhappiness, and this gets away from dogmas and karma, and they are not true. And why? Because karma and sins, all these, we put the responsibility of our happiness and unhappiness to God, and it's completely different. To overcome an unhappy condition only occurs consciously, sincerely, and voluntarily through the improvement achieved through effort. So, in other words, the reason, the tools to overcome a problem, it's in your hands, not in mine, not in God, it's in you. And it's your will, your desire to overcome it is the only way to pass this through. And taking some idea on this, Rodrigo, why we always like to point the fingers, like when we have a problem, when we are having a hardship moment, we point the finger to someone. God is the favorite one, I would say. In the top 10, God is the first one. So why God is doing it? Then is someone else. Then it's not me. Never point the finger to me. So why we have this behavior, my friend?
Because it's easier, much easier to point the fingers to others than to us. So, but you say, jokes apart, I think this is part of our nature in our imperfection. So, the spirits, they say in the spirits book that one of the source of our evil, especially our humanity here in on earth, is selfishness and proud. So whenever we face a situation where we need to confront ourselves and put ourselves in a situation of failing, we have hard times to accept that. So, and we always seek a way to run away from our responsibility, as you said, to point fingers to others. And that's what we do with God as well. So I think it's simple but complex question. Why? Because it has to do with many things. I'll use two situations to illustrate my answer. So, when you get the book Sex and Destiny from André Luiz, he said something there which caught my attention. It's very true. When our life, when we are not following, let's say, the right path, we choose the wrong path, the wrong way, and we keep going in that way, distracted by matter, distracted by everything which is superficial, all this happiness, fake happiness that matter provides us or invites us for. When we do that, we keep throwing thorns on the road. No? So, and then we keep going, and we go in a long way throwing thorns and thorns, and then others are stepping on those thorns and they get injured, and now even ourselves sometimes, because we cause harm to us as well, to our very spirit. That's why sometimes we have difficult incarnations. And then at the end, when we reach a point where we realize that we took the wrong way, so we need to come back. And when we come back, we need to step on all of those thorns we throw on the road. And that's part of our expiation. That's part of our process of, recovering or repaying, let's say, not to or repairing, let's say, the harms that we have caused. But sometimes that journey took so long, and we kept throwing thorns for such a long period, that we, at the end, when we come back, we forget that we did it. We have thrown those thorns in the road, and then we keep blaming others for that. So the Spirit says in the Spirit's book that we have the laws of God on our mind, but we forget it, and then we need to refresh it. And associating this concept to what we have discussed now. So suffering is when we neglect the laws of God, when we don't pay attention to that, when we don't practice the laws of God. When we do that, when we don't practice the law of God, so we enter in disharmony. The laws of God, they are on our mind, and every time we go against that, we act against that, we think against that, when we feel against that, we are not harming, let's say, God, as many people say, oh, this is not good, God is not liking this, God doesn't like that. It's not that way. So we don't like that, because the laws of God are in our consciousness. So whenever we don't follow the laws of God, we suffer, because we cause disharmony to ourselves. So that's why when we create this consciousness about what I'm doing, that I'm against the God's law, so when I regret from doing whatever I do, and I get the consciousness about that, that's the point where I start recreating my future with new actions, with new opportunities. Until there, so we keep completely blind. So I think we put the blame on God for two reasons: because we forgot God's law and the thorns we have thrown, and we are selfish and proud, and we don't want to assume, even when sometimes, and there are times when we do that, we understand that we have caused, but we deny that. When we rebel against God and we say, no, that's not that way, and then we simply deny that for our selfishness and proud, and we don't do it. We put the blame on God because it's easier. So that's why we do that. I was the second situation I'm using to illustrate what I'm saying. I was having a very tough conversation with my daughter recently, 9 years old, because she did something which was not against the rules, let's say the home rules. And then I was talking to her, and she was facing hard time to understand, because of course I told her, hey, whenever we don't follow the rules, we cause a disharmony to ourselves, to the group of people we are surrounded by, you are living together. And there are consequences, because if there are no consequences, we don't know that we are doing something wrong. So this is suffering. Suffering we face is the pain of the soul. Same way we have the pain of the body when the body is injured. When the soul is injured, we have suffering. This is the pain of the soul telling us that something wrong and we need to change. And then I was talking to her, I said, hey, you cannot do that because this is wrong. This causes disharmony and to yourself and to others. And there are consequences when you don't follow the rules, because you need to learn that this is wrong. And she said, no, Papa, so you are doing that to me. So you are creating that. So you are making me suffering. And I kept trying to explain, but of course, for a 9-year-old lady, it's very difficult to explain the cause and consequence law. So it's sometimes, so she, of course, she doesn't want to accept she's wrong, and that's how we are. We are children and young children in our humanity, is our imperfections, our pride, our selfishness, and we don't want to admit that we are wrong. And unfortunately, we will keep receiving the consequences of this attitude of being rebelling against God, until we understand that we are the cause of our sufferings, and we change our actions. But this needs to come with consciousness about God's law. That's how Spiritism is very good on that, because it explains us this law of cause and consequence, and we understand why we are suffering. And a good point on that is sometimes people blame God, and we need to understand that this is the knowledge we have had so far. I mean, so until Kardec, because after Kardec we had a lot of explanation for that. But until Kardec, we didn't have this consciousness about reincarnation or the plurality of lives. So when we would look into someone who is just born and with a deep suffering for a disease, an incurable disease. So, of course, it's difficult to understand the justice and the love of God, why one is born with such a suffering and another one is with a lot of facilities. Okay, a lot of easiness in life, with a lot of money, with health and everything. Of course, before Kardec, before Spiritism, this was very difficult to understand, because we wouldn't have the key to do that. And it was easier for people to blame God for the sufferings. Now with the Spiritism, we don't have this, let's say, this easiness. We don't have this possibility anymore. So we are responsible for our destiny, good or bad. So with the Spiritism, now we understand that whatever happened that has a consequence on ourselves, not in anyone else. So that our suffering is a consequence of ourselves not following God's law. But of course, currently there are, unfortunately, many people who still don't understand reincarnation process, cause and consequence process. And of course, many people are still blaming God, given the lack of consciousness about our reality as spirit, our reality as human beings, our immortal existence. And we need to be patient with those people as well, because they don't have maybe the key to understand that. But for sure, in the future, this will be given to more people. And there will be, as Kardec said in Genesis, in the last chapter, I don't know the name in English, but I think the time has come. So times have come, so that many spirits are coming now to help us on developing this understanding about the reincarnation or the divine justice And this will be easier for people to understand. But so far, materialism is playing a role on that because it's still blinding people for the reality of the spirit in our immortal existence. And but slowly, I guess, humanity is progressing to create more consciousness about its own, how can I say, responsibility for the future and for the happiness or sufferings, and this will be turned around, hopefully very soon. I think that's my answer at least.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Yeah, it's it's well explained. And I hope we can reach someone hard to hear. Like, see the way Kevin Campbell, he says, sometimes I think best evidence of existence of God is the existence of suffering. I don't think it's a very persuasive argument, but it might work. Yeah, Kevin. Yes. Let me see. And good night, Elsa. Greetings to Sweden. Nancy wrote, the more we know, the more responsible we spirits are. If we do wrong, double trouble. Yes, Nancy, we will see this a little bit further. So, good night, Umberto. Good to have you here. Soon you'll be here among us. So, stay connected. And now we go to France. It's election time in France. Let's talk to our French friend here. And Charles, the following message I got from the Spiritist Review from March 1869. So, in other words, this is Kardec words. And he said, to prove that man is responsible for all his actions is to prove his freedom of action. And to prove his freedom is to reveal his dignity. The perspective of responsibility outside the human law is the most powerful moralizing element. It is the objective to which Spiritism leads by the force of things. And the question for you, my friend, is what happened when we spirits realize that we are responsible for our happiness or our unhappiness?
Ah, that's a good one, Steven. Thanks a lot for this question and also for bringing this diamond out of Kardec's writing. March 1869 was the last but one magazine he wrote, because the last one was the one of April, since he died 31st of March 18 of that same year. And indeed, I mean, it has been shown in the video at the beginning. You have told it also, Steven, from these books of Paulo Henrique de Figueiredo, and Rodrigo also has clearly explained several aspects of this. And I would say, if we would not have freedom of action, if we would not have free will, what would we be? Animals? Machines? Something governed deterministically by biochemical reactions in our brain? So really, with this vision, we have no free will, we have no responsibility. If something goes wrong, it's because of the biochemistry, it's because of this, because of that. So then why should I care for anything? Because anyhow, as we told, our selfishness and our pride, as Rodrigo very well explained it, it's not our fault. So, okay, we don't need to care. And basically this morality and the objective. We don't have this powerful moralizing element as Kardec is writing. When we know that, well, anyhow, we have seen also, we have talked about God in previous lives, explaining that if God exists, God has to be infinitely, how to say, just. The God's justice must be perfect. Otherwise, it would not be God. Okay, so that's one thing. So whatever type of reasoning which would say, yo, it's bad luck and it's because God did not care or whatever, is false, cannot be. It's not, how to say, consistent with this basic hypothesis. So this, what you just read from Kardec, is clearly explaining we have the free will, and together with the free will, which is increasing with our evolution, of course, we are increasing also our responsibility for what we are doing good and what we are doing wrong. And this is, as Kardec wrote it exactly very well, the most powerful moralizing element. I used to take, because of suffering, well, suffering exists. A lot of people are suffering in the world. Everything is suffering. Even animals are suffering. That's a little bit more delicate questions to answer. But even animals are suffering. So suffering must have a reason. And since God is infinitely just, these reasons needs to be infinitely just. Okay, there must be a good reason for this suffering. Okay, Rodrigo also talked about reincarnation. If someone is smoking in the life, or eating too much, or hitting with a hammer on his finger, there is pain, there is suffering, and the cause of this pain and suffering is in this life. Okay, sometimes the children are born with a suffering, so the reason is not in this life. So where is it? It is in the past lives. There is a book that will be published very soon, hopefully. I was just asking the lady who wrote this book to when will it be published? It's explaining a very simple thing. It's a spirit who came and by writing explained what happened with her. She had a problem in her life, and then she committed suicide by ingesting some corrosive product, and that then jeopardized the stomach, and she died from that. Okay, the problem is that the effect of this suicide was not only on her physical body, who made her go back to the spiritual world. Her spiritual body was also touched by this action. And then after some times in this troubled situation, which is characteristic on such cases, and then being rescued, and then helped, and then assisted, and so on, came after a given point in time the decision, okay, now I have, if I want to continue, if I really want to cure myself from this mistake I have made, I need to reincarnate. But it was very clear from the beginning that the reincarnation would come with a problem in the digestive parts, in the stomach, and so on. And it was very clear from the beginning that in the plan of this new reincarnation, this spirit would have a very young problem of stomach and a cancer, and she would die young from this cancer. And even her mother, who knew about this before she incarnated, because it's difficult to lose a teenager as a son or a daughter. It's very difficult. Was aware of that and accepted this difficulty, this trial, and so on. And this is exactly what happened. So she had pain and so on, and the reason was not in the present life, it was simply in the previous life. So we have now lots of examples explaining this type of situation, showing that what we do as per of free will, committing a suicide, for instance, can have an effect then in somewhere else in the next life. Okay, and this is why suffering in itself is useful for our evolution. If we hit with a hammer on our finger, we have pain. We know exactly why. Yeah? There is a hematome, bleeding, and what we know exactly why it is giving pain and suffering. So this is then calling our attention. Hey, what should we do in order to avoid this? Maybe use gloves, or being more careful with the hammer, or put our hand away from where the hammer will come down, or whatever. So it pushes us, it's a challenge for us to think about what can we do in order to avoid the pain and the suffering. So sorry, the example is very basic, but you can then extrapolate this example to all the other situation. If you eat too much, you are suffering, okay? So you learn that we should not eat too much. If we are doing drinking or drugs or whatever, the same happens. So this is how we learn. We should not do those things. Our voice of conscience, as we have seen in the movie and as Rodrigo also told, is warning us, but sometimes it's not sufficient. We don't listen. And only when the pain and the suffering is coming, then we listen, we think about, we feel in ourselves the consequence of the wrong thing we have made. And this is which give us this impulse to become better persons, to be more careful, to do things more in harmony with these laws of nature, which is the criteria of the good things, and avoid doing things which are not in harmony with the laws of nature or God's laws, which is the definition of the evil. And this is then, with the time, without God needing to punish or to reward or what, there is nothing like that. It's simply this natural process which is stimulating and pushing us for our evolution to become better persons. And this is basically the reason of the evil. And this is wonderfully recalled by Allan Kardec, because without free will, without freedom of action, without the corresponding responsibility, we would be machines. We would not have dignity. And this perspective is really the most powerful moralizing elements, pushing us to make things better, to make things softer, to make things more in harmony with the natural law, to do whatever we can around us to stop any form of violence, of war, even verbal aggressivity, to stop any type of discrimination, to have tolerance with the ideas of our neighbors, and to seek for this universal fraternity on our planet, which is the only way for our happiness, the only way in this transition to a better world. And this starts with ourselves. If we want to change the world, let's start by changing ourselves and lead by example. And lead by example, thanks to all this learning, all these teachings that we get from pain and from suffering. So that's basically what, when we realize that anything we are doing, we are responsible, and this law of cause and effect, or law of action and reaction, then of course we know that our happiness or our unhappiness only depends on ourselves. It's not the thing like bad luck or not under the right star or whatever. This is bloody totally useless type of excuses. No, we should really face it, look into ourselves, see what was causing those things, and what we shall do for going to happiness and avoiding unhappiness. And this comes through suffering. Of course, it's not easy for the people who are suffering. That's why we are here, to help, to give you this message of hope. The suffering is temporary. It will not be forever. It will only be the duration which is needed for us to understand it. And once we understand it, generally the suffering stops. We have hundreds of examples of people who are ill, who have cancer, with no hope, no cure, and all of a sudden it disappears. Why? Because what is the cause of this illness? We managed to eliminate it in ourselves, and then the illness simply disappears. And these are these wonderful laws of nature that God has given to us. So that's what I could maybe comment out of this message of Kardec, which is somehow summarizing the Spiritist teachings on this subject of suffering.
Wow. I'm speechless. Merci.
Mais de rien.
A lesson.
Okay. You paraphrase Nancy here. Let's stop hammering our fingers.
As simple as this, you see, it's extremely simple.
That's it. See,
Exactly.
I made Nancy my words. And now we go to UK. And let's understand, dear Elsa, why God allow us going to these difficult moments and allowing us going to these hardships. Where is his love towards ourselves?
I think part of this question was beautifully answered by Rodrigo and Charles. But I took this opportunity and I went to the Gospel. And the Gospel, the chapter 27, end of item 20, starting item 21, the ones that has the Gospel at home, Kardec says, God's law is more provident than that, being always just, impartial, and merciful. It places no fixed duration for punishment, inverted commas, no? Whatever the case may be. This law can be resumed in the following manner. Question 21. Human beings always suffer the consequences of their errors. There is no infraction of God's laws that does not have punishment, inverted commas. The severity of the penalty is proportional to the gravity of the offense. As Charles pointed very well, God is love. The things that maybe we suffer is because we need to grow, to evolve, to illuminate our spirit, our soul, and also if we had some action in the past lives that it was really bad, the reaction comes now, but it's not God that is inflating punishment, it's the divine laws. As my hair, a wire of my hair goes down from my head, is because the root needs to go down to leave a space for another thing. It's not God that come here and take my hair. It's the natural, divine laws acting in the world. All the process that we are suffering, inverted commas, is because we are diamonds. We are this carbon that need to readjust and polish and polish and polish, and the beautiful and shiny diamond comes that we are these diamonds. We are enveloped in this carbon, and we are diamonds of God. So, in this manner, humans are constantly choosing their own destiny. We are the ones that everything that we do now will have a consequence for tomorrow or for the future or for next week. As pointed, if you eat too much, we will have stomachache. If we do something too much with our body, entire body will be in pain. That means suffering. It's not God that imposed this suffering towards us. So, same thing, happiness or unhappiness depends on their will, our will towards God. This is the law, the immutable law that conforms to the goodness and justice to God. So, my friends, there are so many things that we can discuss. And at the end of the book, the second part of the book, Heaven and Hell, we can see so many communications in the mediumship meetings in Paris Society and at Kardec's time that show us the consequences of the past actions, as Charles said about suicide. People that commit suicide use different ways to die, but they never die. Human beings never die, only the body dies. So our soul continuing living. So if we trespasses the God's law, of course the consequences comes. But we can say, why Chico Xavier suffered? Why a lot of good people suffer? Why Jesus suffered and went to the cross? In order to show to the world that we can really do things that he had done, because he said, you can do what I'm doing and much more than that. So we can really wake up and wake up our soul towards goodness. If we can really do goodness, it's not because God is imposed to us as a religion per se. Everything is related to the charity, to love, to do to others unto what you want to do unto you. And that is the law of love that governs the world. We have to discover the law. When we discover the laws and put in practice, we will diminish the suffering in the world. Suffering because the war is there, but the war is need because we need to suffer, we need to polish our diamond. So it's a circle that one day this circle doesn't need to do anymore. In the more elevated worlds, the suffering is not there as we have here. The suffering there is not to do good. So we will be, our conscience will say, I didn't do good today, so I have to do tomorrow. So that's the way. And here we have to be more vigilant with ourselves. So we talk about mercy of God. You know, God is merciful. Yes, God is merciful, but the trials that we have to undergo is to help us to evolve. It's not a punishment that comes from God. So the other thing that here is wonderful to read and say is that mercy is a complement of mildness, because the person who is not merciful cannot be mild and pacific. Mercy consists of being able to forget and forgive all offenses. Hate and rancor denotes a spirit without any elevation or magnanimity. Being able to forget offenses is the mark of an elevated soul, which does not perturb itself with the blows that may be dealt. The one is always anxious, of a dark susceptibility and full of bitterness, while the other is calm, full of sweetness and charity. We see this kind of things amongst animals as well. Animals is a soul that is developing a lot of sentiments, action, reaction, instinct that is there, that transform a preservation of life. We see some animals, some dogs. One dog is so pacific, so blessed in the way that the dogs act in their homes, in our families. And the other dogs are really full of bad actions, we can say that, beat you, etc. But they are in development, our souls in development. One day our souls was in this situation as well. We have instincts to act quickly towards things, or react more saying, better saying, but we should put in practice the action of love and gratitude, and not put everything is God's fault, or something happened to me, as Stevan said, it's because God did this to me. No, it's ourselves. We can better our life We can do bad things and be against us in our daily lives, towards our family, towards ourselves. But at the end of the day, it's our responsibility to improve our gestures, behaviors, in order to improve our souls. Everything will be imprinted in our perispirit. In next incarnation, we will undergo what we have done in this incarnation, perhaps much more. Okay? To improve ourselves means to be pacific, to be blessful toward others, to be charitable, understandable, and sometimes in silence. Because a religion, we are not a religion. So some religions impose penalties and say the penalties come from God. Spiritism teaches different way. Everything comes from us. God created us to be perfect. Doesn't matter how long it takes. One day we will. We have the genes of God in our spirit when He created us, or He or she created us. This good energy goes on. We should go towards goodness, toward Pacific times, in order to improve the world and other worlds where one day we will be there. And that's it. There are more things to read here, but I will stop there now. Thank you.
Amazing. So thank you, my dear. Thank you. So um,
There is no condemnation,
yes,
eternal
yes.
condemnation.
In other words, let's stop hammering our fingers, or drive more carefully that hammer, because at the end we are the ones who does everything. So we are responsible for our life when we are responsible for our actions. Once we understand this, it's easy. And again, if you are thinking about suicide because killing yourself will stop the suffering, the only thing I want to tell you, my friend, is when you wake up, you will see that you doubled the suffering. It's an illusion. Think that killing yourself will stop the suffering. I agree. You may have going through hardships. I agree. Perhaps you don't see a way out, but please look for advice. Talk to a psychologist. Talk to a friend. Talk to someone. But don't get rid of your life with the illusion that everything will be sorted. Okay? Okay, so yeah, Guilherme said here, it's a massive mistake. Suicide is not a way out. It's not.
So we have plenty of books which are explaining this now, and there will be, luckily, one more showing the effect that you are putting a new problem on a lot of existing problems. So it's just getting worse, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So we really need to develop the patience and also to understand one thing. Having pain is one thing. Suffering is a slightly different thing. There are people who are suffering without having pain, and there are people having pain and which are not suffering. So there are some different aspects here to be considered. So the suffering is, there is something more in it, which is a state of mind. And this is also explaining probably why you have people who are in desperate situation, but which are very quiet, calm, coming close to the dead, to the last minute, and so on, and all this serenity, the smile, and whatever. And this is really giving huge example to all of us, because it's really the best way to finish our mission here on Earth, because one day, sooner or later, we will have to finish it and to go back to the other side, to our spiritual home, as we say.
And Joanna De Angelis said that, based on what you said, Charles, that happiness is the state of serenity in any circumstance of life. So this is exactly true.
Yeah. And also, Rodrigo, you put a very good advice here on our comments. You want to tell
Yeah, this book is very nice. So in this chapter, I think it's the 11th chapter in the book, analyze your own afflictions. So Emmanuel just correlates the afflictions based on our imperfections, like selfishness, pride, and many others. So I won't tell you now because I'm not in with the book, and by heart I don't remember exactly, but it's a very good book to read, and especially this chapter to understand, because sometimes we think that yes, so I'm proud, I have pride, so I'm selfish. What's the consequence? There are consequences. Every single attitude, every single behavior we do which is against God's law has a consequence and has an affliction that we suffer. So it's very good book to read it, a very good chapter. So I recommend it.
It's already in English, Rodrigo?
I really don't know. I can check. I don't know.
So.
I
But,
don't think so.
as I said, the Heaven and Hell, the second part of the book, there are so many communications that is a base for everything started there. So if you see all the ones that commit suicide, different kind of people that died and communicate there, it's amazing that you can really see the cause and effect of an incarnation that's already passed and that they're communicating. Is the lessons, the various, I don't know how many communications there, but the second part entirely talk about after death, the way that they are saying how they live they lived their lives, how the way that they died, why they are suffering, and the communications. So easily to understand. And the comments, Kardec comments was amazing as well.
Yeah. And
Okay?
want to say buenas noches, los amigos de Rosario en Argentina. Marcela Denton.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
Buenas tardes.
Marcelita.
Buenas tardes, Buenas tardes,
Buenas tardes, sí. Es buenas noches en España. Buenas tardes en Argentina.
Yeah. So, I think that's it, my friends. It's amazing having you all here. Let's go to our announcements before we wrap up. And it is with a deep, I would say, regret, but we lost someone very important for the Spiritist movement, because Brian Foster returned to the spiritual world yesterday, and he was a person who did a lot of work here in Kardec Radio. He wrote many books. So some of the books it's here. I also put it for you. It's a non-Brazilian talking about spiritism. So this is priceless. Like we have here Charles, but like Rodrigo, Elsa, and I, we are Brazilian. So spiritism it is in certain way with us, but listen, those non-Brazilians talking about spiritism, it's priceless. And Brian Foster, it's one of these people here. So our thank you for Brian, and please keep inspiring us in order to keep doing your efforts to spread the word here. So thank you, Brian, and our sentiments to Brian's family as well.
Angelina and his wife. Angelina, his daughter.
Yes, Angelina. Okay, So next week, the Promise Consoler. That's the main topic from next week. So don't miss it. Next Wednesday, 9 p.m., 27th of April. Okay, 9 p.m. London time. And then we come with another new show here with Guilherme Diaz on Thursday. Tomorrow, we start tomorrow, the Spiritist Philosophy and Mediumship. So Guilherme will give his talk at 6:30 p.m. London time. I would say 7 o'clock, because this is a great opportunity to listen what Guilherme wants to tell us. And also, the introduction to Spiritism is not a lecture; it's a webinar. You know, a series of 7 webinars given by Vanessa Ferreira. It's the Spiritist Concepts, the Roadmap program. It's good for you who wants to get to know more about Spiritism, going from the simple concepts until understand a little bit deeper the Spiritism. This is a great opportunity for you. Okay, so what more? Coffee break every Wednesday, 4 p.m. A coffee break with Kardec and our dear friend Munir Gariba, always giving us wise comments from Kardec. Every other Tuesday, conversations on mediumship at 8:30 p.m. London time with Rafael Caldas and Guilherme Dias. Every Saturday, 10:30 a.m. London time, we do have mediums book course with Munir, Guilherme Diaz, and Charles Kempf. And also, is every other Tuesday from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. we have a study of the book No Solar. It's a Zoom meeting. Please join SSL with this effort in order to give these studies in English. And everything is moving as it should be. We are having our talks, daily talks. It's wonderful. I saw many of them. It's recorded there, so please, it's amazing see how Spiritism view in different parts of the world. It's amazing. It's a wonderful
Event.
not event, a wonderful, oh gosh, I forgot the word. A wonderful opportunity to see how we have the Spiritism in other countries. Okay? And that's it for tonight. So I want to say merci, Charles.
Merci beaucoup.
Gracias, Rodrigo.
A vosotros.
Obrigado, Elsa. So thank you all. Thank you, everyone who joined us today. Nancy, Marcela, Elsoli, Mr. Guilherme Dias, Realia Home, Roberto Schubert Coelho, so Kevin Campbell, Ruben de los Santos, so our patrocinio José, Luviem. So I want to say thank you. I wish you all a good night, and I'll see you next Wednesday. Thank you, guys. Have a nice
Au revoir. À bientôt.
Bientôt. Ciao.